I want to take a moment to talk to you a little bit about present votes. There's a few times I voted present this term. And I laid out very clearly at the beginning of the term why I was going to vote present. What were the parameters in which I would vote present? And we voted 190-something times, and I've only voted present a few times. But they obviously draw media attention, and I want to make sure that everyone at home is aware of why I do it. There are 3 situations in which I'll vote present on a bill. And I'm just going to read it to you so that you guys can have it here straight from how I presented it to the public at the beginning of the term. When I could otherwise support the legislation, but the legislation uses improper, for example, unconstitutional means to achieve its ends. So this situation often arises when legislation is drafted in such a way that the law does not apply equally to persons or entities that are doing the same thing. In other words, when we have a law that treats different people, or people who are doing basically the same thing, or entities that are in basically the same business, or they operate the same way, differently. We have 2 sets of laws. One for the person or entity we don't like, and one for the other people. I'm going to vote present. I'm going to vote present. I don't think it's up to Congress, or it's appropriate for Congress to decide who's good and who's bad in that sense, in the sense that we have 2 sets of laws. If you don't like a type of activity that organizations or people are doing, defund that activity completely, or stop that activity completely. But don't pick and choose which ones are really bad and which ones are somewhat bad. The second situation which I vote present is when representatives have not been given a reasonable amount of time to consider the legislation. This has only happened a few times, but we had, during that first budget that I talked about where we cut $61 billion, we had about 100, I think it was 104 amendments we had to vote on. And we had to vote on these amendments in two to 3 days. And they just went around the clock. We were voting at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Well, these amendments, because we had so many, we had 104 we voted on, but actually 600 were offered. And so in 3 days, my office is considering 600 amendments. And I take this seriously, and I try to read every single amendment that we get, because it's important to me that I know what I'm voting on. And so we're going around the clock. Well, with a few of these, we can't really make a decision in 2 minutes. If I'm trying to decide, and we really only have a couple, when you have that many, you really only have a couple minutes to examine them. And when I'm trying to decide on things that are very obscure, areas I'm not familiar with at all, do I fund a project in Missouri, or do I fund a project in Louisiana? When I know nothing about, and you have to choose, the amendment is to decide between the 2, and you know nothing about them. If I vote yes or no on this type of amendment, it's just a random vote, because I don't know anything about it. And frankly, most of my colleagues don't know anything about it either. If you're in that area, if you live in that area where that project is, you might know something about it, but otherwise you're not going to know anything. So a present vote in that situation is just as good as a yes or no, because it's random anyways. If I vote yes or no, I'm not really aware of what I'm doing anyways. The third situation which I vote present is the typical situation, which is a conflict of interest. And that hasn't happened yet. That's where you'd have some financial interest in the legislation or something to that effect. Then you vote present. But I want to make sure that you guys were aware of why I do it. And it's in very rare circumstances. But I want to draw attention to these present votes. Like, one of the main reasons for voting present is to draw attention to it. I want the public to be aware that there is something wrong with this legislation. That it seems good on the outside, but there's something wrong with it on the inside if you take a closer look at it. If someone was trying to avoid a vote by voting present, it wouldn't make any sense, because you just get scrutinized. And I'm trying to get scrutinized. If you want to avoid a vote, in other words, you're trying to avoid taking a tough vote, you just abstain. Abstain is different from present. Abstain means you don't push anything. And this happens all the time, where you have members of Congress who are on the floor, they're actually there and they don't vote. And then you don't get a present vote, you just get no vote. So when you look at things like, I voted present on that NPR defunding bill, which didn't actually save taxpayers any money, and I can explain that to you guys in a bit if you'd like. But when I voted present on that bill, 11 people didn't vote on that bill. And so this happens all the time. In fact, on an average, my office pulled up the stats, on an average vote, on an average bill, 11 people don't vote out of the 435. So that's the average. And I have never missed a vote in Congress. I voted every single time. I voted every single time as a member of the State House. I have never missed a single vote. 1,314 votes in the State House and over 190 votes in Congress. I've voted every single time because that's what I know to do.